Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math and Dragon Ball Super. So, when it comes to Dragon Ball Super, it's polarizing to say the least, but I did enjoy it, flaws and all, and I want to talk about that too in this video, but my main thing is talking about how math is used throughout, Dragon Ball Super, and as a consequence, like Dragon Ball in general. At this point, I've made a lot of videos on Math and Dragon Ball, and I certainly made some that have talked about Super, but I wanted to focus on Super in particular in this video, kind of give it its own thing, and so I want to talk about what kind of led us to that moment, and kind of paint you the pictures by the numbers, so to speak. And yeah, so I'm going to talk about those things and how math is used in the meta sense with Dragon Ball and notably Super, and my feelings on Super along the way is, as a show, sure, and power scaling and debates on that. And I'm definitely going to talk about how things like Super Saiyan God and Super Saiyan Blue or stupidly broken, and as a consequence, something like Ultra Instinct absolutely is. But we knew that. We didn't need to see the explicit map, but we knew that. But we're gonna get into that, and so many other things along the way. And if you have seen Dragon Ball Super, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I hope you give it a chance. And just for the record, again, like I liked it despite the flaws, and I'm going to talk about why I liked it, but I'm also going to talk about some of the flaws. Um, and yeah, so assume that there will be spoilers ahead. Just assume all the spoilers for everything Dragon Ball, notably Super, and also just including the movies because again, everything Dragon Ball. So keep that in mind. And if you're on board, great. If you don't want to see it because you want to avoid spoilers, fair. Here we go. Spoilers ahead. Okay, so with Dragon Ball Super. It came out back in 2015 and it ended up lasting for quite some time, going into 2018 with a total of 131 episodes and two movies to boot. But before we got this Dragon Ball, before we got it all that Dragon Ball, right? Like there was so much more before it, and it's just kind of crazy that we got it. So with the initial Dragon Ball, right? That manga ran from 1984 to 1995. It ran for 11 years, 42 volumes, 519 chapters. Um, Two anime series, based on said manga. One that was a sequel that was anime only, and it just kept on going, right? Because we had like everything I just said about the manga. Then we had 153 episodes of Dragon Ball, 291 episodes of Dragon Ball Z, 64 episodes of GT. Later, we would get Dragon Ball Kai, which was a recut version of Dragon Ball Z, and that was 167 episodes. So here we have hundreds, like literally hundreds of episodes, like somewhere around 800, if you count all those in, right? Which is insane. And yeah, there have been like longer running animes, but still, Dragon Ball's not done, so who knows what'll happen. And with all of those, just like with the manga and the anime, we also had a bunch of movies, around 20 movies overall. Like what like we had three, might have just been 20. I don't know, let me see. So we had three Dragon Ball movies. Eventually we'd have 15 Dragon Ball Z movies, one GT movie, and so that's 19. And we have 20 if we count Dragon Ball Evolution, and then 21 if we count episode of Bardock, which I don't know, you get into debates on canon on that and everything, but you could argue things about GT and Evolution too, but and just the movies, I don't know, canon's messy, but my whole thing is like you can make an argument there are 21 films, but if you wanted to not count episode of Bardock or Evolution, you still have nearly 20. But I bring up all of this because there was a lot of material, Dragon Ball wise, before Super was a thing. And by the way, that number, the 800 stuff, that count included Super, which was 131 episodes. But before we even got there, we still had literally hundreds of episodes, right? And then we also had countless games, as well as TV specials. And it's a crazy thing, right? There's a lot of Dragon Ball merchandise as well over the years, and at this point, Dragon Ball is almost 40. At the start of Dragon Ball Super, it was a little over 30, and it's kind of horrifying to think about how long ago that was, because Dragon Ball Super came out 8 years ago. But again, I mentioned all that to say that there was a lot of material preceding Super and a lot after, and it played around with a lot of formulas that have been established in Dragon Ball lore. And one of the big things that I didn't mind, but some people do, was the idea of more transformations. And honestly, like if you don't like transformations or like additional transformations, that's fine and that's good, and I get that. I mean, for me, I like transformations; they're cool, and you can have some fun with them. But anyway, so one of the big things with Dragon Ball Super, as anything Dragon Ball, fighting is a big component of that, right? Um, and with that fighting, you have these characters moving at these insane speeds with these insane strength, and sorry, with insane strength, and they're also monitoring their key and being in control. And all of this is mathematical. And as they fight, they have to keep their speeds in mind. They have to keep the speed of their opponent in mind. They have to also do the same with strength and ki, and consider how much destruction they may dish out. And all of this is just math. And we get to see that in motion with Super. And Super is an interesting case because, the anime was the big driving force, with the manga being like support slash promotional material, right? The anime came first, followed shortly thereafter with the manga. Um, and the thing is, like, just seeing the battles in motion, that's always a nice touch for me. And I have conflicting issues with the manga, but like that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, like with fighting, it's something that's inherently mathematical, right? You're dealing with position, you're dealing with strength, you're dealing with speed, and in this case, key. And the thing is, like, not only is there math inherent into that fighting, but there's math in animating it, right? In that whole process, right? It's like there's math in getting that idea of motion across, getting that idea of speed across, getting that idea of damage across. And there's math in the time that it takes to animate something, right? Math in the frames that you use to animate something. Math in the coloring, math in the lighting, and math in the sound and the music. And like sound is just such an interesting thing because it's something that's inherently mathematical, and music is a result, carries that forward, right? Because like, all right, with sound, you're dealing with all sorts of things, right? You're dealing with pitch, you're dealing with frequency and all that, and you're also going to be dealing with like tempo in particular with music, and like things like timbre and stuff like that, but also like how the notes are composed, how long a note will last, right? Like how well, yeah, so I guess a good way to say is like there's math in the note itself, right? Like what that means, and how long it's going to be held, how it connects to other notes, and math in the instrumentation, just math in measuring out everything and getting that to come together in a cohesive way, and math in the timing, and then like something like that opening sequence and end sequences, you have to not only have the music and how long that plays out, but also what images will be associated with that music and how those things connect. And back to the stuff within the show, there's not only math in the fighting, but math in the training, and what the characters are doing. Like they might be in something like a gravity chamber where you're like dealing with gravity that's hundreds of times more powerful, or the hyperbolic time chamber, which they use more in Super than they did in Z. And there's like one point early on where they use time chamber for like 3 years. So it's like they were gone for 3 days, but one day is 1 year within the chamber. Sorry, one day on the outside of the chamber is 1 year within the chamber. And so, yeah, they were gone for 3 days on the outside, and they were in there for 3 years, and training accordingly, raising their ki, raising their power, and going through a lot of food, no doubt. Um, and so Super is an interesting beast, right? Because not only do they have those things, but they have the regular Dragon Balls. And not only is there math in the Dragon Balls, the amount of them, but also how powerful they are, how many wishes they grant, and the idea of locating them. The Dragon Radar is pretty convenient in doing so, and keeping track of the position and all that stuff, and being able to get them. But then you also have the idea of the Super Dragon Balls, which are more powerful and much larger, right? They're planet size, and it's crazy. Super Shinron's the thing. And it's freaking gold, man. It's like it's crazy. But not only is there math with all of the things that I just said, but math and how these characters are dealing with their daily life and power scaling within the show and outside is a thing. And I'll get to that too. But I wanted to mention, like, we get a couple tournament arcs, which is great. We have the Universe 6 arc, and that's pretty cool. That's the traditional tournament. You have X amount of opponents on both sides, and they're going round for round until they get eliminated. And what two of the big things that came out of that for me was like, well, three. So one of the big things was like, it was new. And I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. The another big thing is that it introduced Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken, and the third thing was that it introduced Hit, and that character is like super mathematical, and not just because of the regular fighting, but because of the time skip. And so we'll talk about like all those things throughout this. So Super is again like 131 episodes, but it's a strange case because I found myself saying that if you miss the first, like I think it's like 27, either way it's like nearly 30 episodes, you should be good, because there's a weird case that Dragon Ball Battle of Gods came out in 2013. Um, Followed 2 years later or so in 2015 with Resurrection F. Months after Resurrection F came out, we got Super. It was quick and fast. It was kind of crazy how it was going. We're getting a lot of Dragon Ball in a lot of time. And if you didn't know or didn't remember, Battle of Gods and Resurrection F, or Z movies, they were Dragon Ball Z movies. It's crazy. And so, with that in mind, you think the starting point with Super would be different, right? But they redo those arcs. I mean, well, they redo the movies as arcs, right? So it's kind of crazy. Uh, Battle of Gods there was stuff that the movie did way better, and there were a few things that the arc did better. Overall, it wasn't bad, but it's like I didn't need to re-see the material, especially so soon. And then Resurrection F, that stuff was even worse because like there was nothing to me that arc did better, and it was literally months um, after Resurrection F. Like it was kind of crazy, right? Like but anyway, so the first 30 episodes or so of Super, it's hard to recommend, but we got to Universe 6, and that's when things got interesting. And I also think for a lot of people, that's when it felt more like what you kind of expect of Dragon Ball at that point. Because, right, if you watch Dragon Ball, chances are you started with Z. And even if you watch the first Dragon Ball, um, chances are you think of Dragon Ball and you think of the crazy fights at the crazy speeds. And I'm not saying we didn't get any of that in Super for the beginning part, but it's just like we didn't get that at the same volume. I think it wasn't until the fight with Hit that it felt more like crazy and out of control and like Dragon Ball. Um, and then with Hit, his powers are interesting, right? He's an assassin, and he is like top technique is the time skip. Like this dude is seriously jumping forward in time. He's skipping in time. and using that in his fighting, and it gets super crazy, and he uses it in some interesting way. Goku does eventually figure out how to counter, which is insane in itself, and Jiren does eventually. Well, I mean, he doesn't eventually do it. He just does it. He stops the time skip, which is an insane thing later on. But Hit is an awesome character, and he pushes Goku, and the time skip is awesome. And then again, it's like one of those inherently mathematical things. Time is mathematical in its nature, as are all things. But um, so that was a big thing. And then there's like a Super Saiyan, like a blue Kaioken times 20. Let me back up. So power scaling and power levels or battle power, whatever one you prefer, they've been a big part of the community since Z. Like if you grew up on that, I find that it's hard to let those ideas go. And to be honest, like if somehow you saw Dragon Ball first, which there are some people who saw Dragon Ball first before Dragon Ball Z, then even before you were introduced to battle level, oh sorry, power levels slash battle power and power scaling, you were probably power scaling whether you realized it or not. Right? You were comparing characters and their strength to one another based on what you knew about the situation, and seeing how they grew and how they adapted, and seeing if you can figure out who had the edge or not. In any case, with Dragon Ball Z, things got up. You were introduced to the concept of power levels and power scaling, and what's fascinating about that is so one, it gives you a more concrete way to judge power, or seemingly so, right? Because it can be subversive. But I'd argue that that is actually a good thing in this case, because like throughout early Dragon Ball, like Z, and I'm sorry, words I can use them. Um, so with Dragon Ball Z, right, like we see early on that the main characters can hide their key, right? They can suppress it. So we have scouters, and scouters will measure someone's power level, but it doesn't take into account that people can suppress their power levels. It also doesn't take into account that people can fire off hierarchy in bursts, right? And raise their power level like in an instant for a second. And they also don't take into account transformations. Um, so it's a fascinating thing to me because you're using this tool, you're collecting data, but that data needs context, right? And you might have some context, and the power level that you're seeing on your scouter may be relevant for most of the beings in the universe. But if you have a character who can play around with a key more, it's useless, or at least useless to you. It's useless. Sorry, it's useful to them if they can play around with it. But I bring that up because we're obsessed with power levels still, because at the end of the day, people like math more than they think, and it helps us make sense of things, right? It's putting a name to what's happening in the universe, right? And so after a while, we don't hear anything about power levels. Like if you see anything with power levels past the last recorded power level, which was Trunks, which he was suppressing hardcore. If you see anything past that, it's not real because they stopped using them in the series. Um, but what I find interesting is the idea of scaling, right? Because so here's the thing, right? We have our characters and they're getting more powerful over time. We see that in Dragon Ball. We see that in Dragon Ball Z. And then we get the ideas of further transformations, because transformations were always part of Dragon Ball. Like we have Goku going to Zaru. That was a thing early in Dragon Ball. We're not giving a multiplier at that time, but later we give it as 10, which feels insane in retrospect, at least to me. But anyway, so we get more in Dragon Ball Z, and one of the big ones is like the Super Saiyan. And trust me, I'm bringing all this up because it's going to tie back to what I have to say with Super. So we have the idea of Super Saiyan, and if you're paying attention to the Namek Saga, Frieza Saga, whatever you want to call it, um, the multiplier that is given, which is 50, um, sounds insane, but given what we get in the Frieza saga, it actually makes sense. And Goku is just getting some powerful gains, right? Because like he starts off that saga at like over 8,000. He jumps to 3 million in his base. You know, and he eventually gets that Super Saiyan transformation, which is a 50 times multiplier, which brought him up to 150 million, um, in which he was able to dominate Frieza, who was at 120 million. So those are the numbers that were given at that time, and there's just so much like leading into that, and like Goku got some crazy gains. But we're given that multiplier, and for better or worse, that stuck around, right? And then you have Super Saiyan 2, which is 2 times Super Saiyan, or 100 times the base. And then you have Super Saiyan 3, which is 4 times Super Saiyan 2, 8 times Super Saiyan, and 400 times the base, which is already crazy. All right, and the base varies, but we can still use the multipliers to give us an idea of what's going on in the fight. Because right at a certain point we don't know the power level, so but we know the characters are getting progressively stronger. Um, and so then you got all that crazy stuff. Then Battle of Gods happens. Super Saiyan God is introduced. We don't actually get a multiplier for Super Saiyan God, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say at least 1,000, and that is lowballing it. From everything that we saw, right? And for the record, that's just 2,000. Sorry, I say like it's 1,000 times the base, or 2.5 times Super Saiyan 3's power, if that makes sense. And like I said, I feel like that's lowballing it, like to say the least. But let's say we have Super Saiyan God, right? And then like we have Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, which is Super Saiyan Blue, and we have that, and we say that hey, that's a 50 times multiplier on Super Saiyan God, um, and because going Super Saiyan on top of that, right? And then we say we have Super Saiyan God, um, Kaioken times 20, right? Which is going to be 20 times that. So if we multiply everything out using Super Saiyan God is a 1,000 multiplier on base, which is, again, I maintain, a low ball value, then Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20 would be at least a 1 million times multiplier of a base. Um, which is insane. And also, again, that would be lowballing it if we factor everything into account. It's insane. And so we might not low power levels, but we can get how powerful Goku, for instance, is getting when he's using that form, which makes it insane to think about that. Like, if those numbers were to actually hold up, then it's like I get that Goku is testing himself and he likes to do that as any Saiyan would, but it's kind of insane because if you feel the need to use blue, then it's like, oh my god, especially Blue Kaioken, which we see him get a better understanding of and mastery of the route. Um, Actually, and I'm trying to think because it's been a while, but like it might have been that during Universe 6 arc, Goku used maybe a Super Saiyan Kaioken times 10, and then like the Super Saiyan Kaioken times 20 was used during the Tournament of Power. It's been a minute, but I bring all that up to say like power levels and power scaling have been crazy, and the power scaling in Super is crazy, but that is power scaling is not a problem that started in Super. And the idea of power scaling got kind of broken after Namek. It got harder and harder to see where the characters were, and there was a lot of bouncing back and forth. I mean, you got the idea, but it's still crazy to think about. So yeah, I'm going to pause this for a second, so make sure my video doesn't get long. Um, you probably won't notice it if I did that right, but wanted to say it, so I'll be back in a sec. So, okay, here we go. I am back. I wasn't gone long, but I'm back. Um, so we also we see that like Goku's multipliers are insane, and if we're watching the Tournament of Power, like Vegeta's Super Saiyan Blue evolution seems to compare to Goku's Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20. And if that's the case, like that's an insane power up too, right? And Ultra Instinct, who even knows? So it's just something bonkers. It's fundamentally broken in a way that I find hilarious and awesome. Um, but anyway, right? Like we can have an idea of the multipliers and have some idea of how the fight is going, but it's hard to like talk about levels. So for a lot of people to go on feats, but that's tricky too. Um, but I do find that things aren't easy enough to like follow, right? But it just gets crazy. And I wanted to talk about the tournament of power for a while. So with the tournament of power, it got kind of crazy, right? Because like, so we have 12 universes, four were exempt from the tournament of power. Based on their moral level, which again, is just something like mathematical in nature, but we don't get to see the specifics of. But anyway, so for the remaining universes, they had to compete. Like, you know, if you watched it, you've seen it. But the idea is like, so there's 8 universes who have to pick 10 fighters, and it's a battle royale where, you know, you have to like ring out your opponents. And you're given approximately 48 minutes. There was another unit of measurement that they used for time. I think it was like something like called tax, or I think. But anyway, it's like 100 tax, which was like the equivalent of 48 minutes. And then like, what does that mean for the fight? It's always tricky with it because it's like, so we're using cinematic timing to show what we're going to see in the screen, or like what's actually going to be going on in the fight, because these characters are moving really, really quickly. It's just like, well, how's that going to last 48 minutes? But then it's like, but that's what we're thinking about with how they move and how logic dictates. It's like, well, how will that be shown in the show? So that's a fascinating thing to me and how that played out. But so uh, there was the tournament part, and then there was the whole pre-tournament part. Um, whereas like, so there's like I'm sorry, I can use my brain. I'm tired. But anyway, there was a large portion of Dragon Ball Super devoted to the tournament, whether we're talking about the tournament itself or the pre-tournament stuff. And either way, it's a lot of episodes. Um, and so there's the pre-tournament stuff where you know, Goku is finding people and everything, and some characters have to be kind of brought up to scale, so to speak, and that it's interesting or frustrating depending on who you talk to. Um, but anyway, so you have this tournament, 8 universes, 10 teams each, 80 fighters total in this battle royale. Um, the arena that they're in had to be constructed, and there's math and how it was constructed and using what, like, right, because it's like, I forget the name of the material, but the idea is like it had to be super tough to be able to take the damage from the fighters. And then you know, it had to be cover a certain area. And then there was the ticker used to measure the time, and you know, that was fascinating. So yeah, and 48 minutes to do the whole thing, and it was a fascinating tournament. I do think there were a few episodes where I was not a fan of, and I feel like they were wasting time. But I do like the idea overall, and I wish we got to see more from the other universes in Super. Because, you know, it's just like, hey, you have 12 universes. Like, why aren't we exploring that more? And why haven't we sent? But anyway, so I'm trying to think if there's some other major things that I want to cover. Um, so yeah, it's just that there's math in the world of Dragon Ball in general, and Super is no exception to that. There's math in just how these characters are operating, both in a fight and searching for Dragon Balls and just their everyday life. Then there's math in how the tournaments are structured, how many episodes they're going to be, the rules themselves within the tournament. There's math in the animation process. There's math in the music. There's just math across the board. I mean, math in the voice acting too. Kind of going back to the idea of sound, there's so many tricks that a voice actor can use to get certain things across. And one of the things that I've been thinking about today is just like eye shape. And I say that because right, it seems like a simple thing, but it's just like that idea that we associate certain morality or certain emotions with eye shape, and size, right? Like for instance, so a character like Goku has rounder eyes, right? Rounder eyes and bigger than like let's say a character like Vegeta who has more like triangular eyes and more narrow. And then like if Goku goes Super Saiyan, no, he has the same sort of eyes as Vegeta does, and a lot of like the villain characters in Dragon Ball will have those like sort of evil looking eyes, or the eyes that we associated with like evilness, or in some cases seriousness. Either way, it's interesting because you're just drawing shapes, but those shapes have context when drawn on other shapes that remind us of people or made to look like people. We live in a world of shapes and motion, and there's math of that across the board. So I find that stuff interesting because like even the stuff that we think is small, there's math across the board, and then there's math in drawing these characters in animating them. There's math in the scaling, not just the power scaling, but also like scaling a character to another character or a character to a building, and then like I was saying earlier, just getting speed across is fascinating. Um, Math and the colors, math and the lighting, and the choices, and what they're trying to get across and convey is just it's a beautiful thing. Um, so, sorry, it's a long day. Um, and of course, we had like two movies with Super, and I talked about those on different occasions. Um, but like and how crazy those were, and a lot of things apply. But I know one of the things I like talking about were like the wishes made in that movie, or like the proposed wishes, because like with Dragon Ball Super Broly, um, both Frieza and Bulma are going after the Dragon Balls, and Frieza wants to make a wish to I think be like 5 centimeters taller, um, and it's just that was so funny to me because like uh, it, he wanted to do 5 centimeters instead of something like 10 centimeters because he wanted to make it seem like he was still growing. And then it was brought up that like his second form is already bigger, and then he's like, well, people would know though, and it's just like it's a ridiculous thing. And then meanwhile, Boma wanted to look 5 years younger instead of 10 because she didn't want it to be noticeable. And then over in Dragon Ball, the superhero, hate saying that, um, we actually do get wishes that are made instead of just like wishes that were desired. Like you get Piccolo, he had his power unlocked and became Orange Piccolo. There was also a second form he got before Orange Piccolo, but either way, he was unlocking his power, and there's math in that. But there's also math in the wishes that Bulma made. One was to I think like have her eyelashes be like 2 millimeters like thicker or something. I forget the exact numbers. It might have been that, but that's one. And then the one she wished for a firmer butt. There's math in that wish, math in that firmness, math in that butt. It was so ridiculous though. Um, but so it's just like math is everywhere, and like jokes are no exception. I just like how there's math in comedy, math in a joke, and the setup of a joke, like setup plus punchline equals joke, and then like the specific wishes here, like right. So like there's math in the amount of wishes, math in what was being wished for, and it just ends up being pretty funny to me. That being said, Dragon Ball Super Broly and Dragon Ball Super Superhero were awesome movies and awesome additions to Dragon Ball. And so, there's math in those productions and just math and the money needed for that in Dragon Ball Super as a whole. And then, meanwhile, we do have a manga, which I have mixed feelings about, but there's math in that too. Math in, when it releases, how long it is per chapter. There's math in the panels that get drawn, what's getting drawn in those panels. You know, there's math in drawing those shapes, math in trying to indicate motion. Just math panel, and just making very deliberate decisions about it. And if you're reading it in black and white, then still there's math in that and just drawing everything. But then like more so if you get the color version. So it's like it's kind of crazy to think about because there's just so much that we kind of take for granted for in a way where it's just like, hey, that's math. It's all math, math everywhere. um, I'm tired, but I already started this video, so we're finishing it. Um, so yeah, I talked about Dragon Ball Super a lot, and I mean, I'll still talk about it in various ways in the future, but in this video, I talked about it a lot. And if I want to talk about my feelings a little bit more, it's kind of mixed. You've heard a little bit throughout this, but it's like Dragon Ball Super is something that I enjoy. And it's a reminder, though, that I can enjoy things that are like what I considered flawed. And that doesn't mean that I can't, right? You can enjoy things that you count as flawed, and that's okay, right? Um, Also, someone else might think that is not that flawed, or other people may think is more flawed, and that's fine in either case, you know. Um, but I liked it overall. I think when it was at its best, it was just like it was the best when it was at its best, and when it was at its low, it was like because okay, so those first 30 episodes or so, I was not a fan of because I had seen Battle of Gods and Resurrection F. Um, and I like those movies for the record, but seeing them as arcs didn't really work out. And when Dragon Ball Super was announced, you know, you wanted new things, and because Dragon Ball Super came out a few months after Resurrection F, it's like it didn't give us a chance to have a break from that material. So it's just like Battle of Gods happened a few years before, and that was fine, but it was just like too close, right? So everyone who would have seen those movies were still familiar with it. So it's just like you're going through these episodes, which are coming out a week at a time. So it's nearly 30 weeks before you get like new material, right? But there's a very small arc in there with Goo Vegeta, and you're just like, I don't know about this show. You want to like it, you want to continue, but it was tough, at least back then. But you know, I got through that, and then like we all did, and then the Universe 6 arc came out, and it's like, okay, well, there's potential, and then they kind of did their own thing for a little bit, and it was like, okay, there was some more slice of life episodes in there, and it was chill for a while, and then the Future Trunks arc happened, and we're introduced to Goku Black and Zamasu, and whew, it was a great arc overall. I don't like how it ended. I hated how it ended actually, but because it was not the best, but the arc overall was like pretty insane. The action at its best was fast paced and brutal. At that point, right? Like there's some people who got mad because they didn't know how strong Trunks had gotten, or like they were trying to say like it didn't make sense and all that. It's like, okay, who cares? This is awesome. But I get why that was the question, and you know he got a power up in that arc, so it's like okay, and then it's like, well, how strong is Goku Black? And it's like I don't know. But for me, I could live with that because I was enjoying the arc and enjoying the insanity. And again, I didn't like how it ended, but how it ended didn't actually ruin the arc for me. And then after it ended, you know, you get more filler episodes, or I don't know if you want to call them filler, because you know it was a little different than how some other animes are produced in this case. But either way, there was some nice stuff in there. There was like an episode with Goku versus Hit, and it was kind of like Christmas, or it came out on Christmas. um, but anyway, so there was some you know filler sort of stuff in there, and then like that idea of the tournament power started with the pre-tournament arc, and there were some actually pretty good moments in there. I liked Goku versus Krillin and the episode 90, the episode with Gohan versus Goku. That was like my favorite Dragon Ball episode, like period. It was just like I like where it was going. And the crazy thing about that is like in that episode, Gohan states that he's gonna go his own way power wise, and he's going to have a transformation that even Goku and Vegeta hasn't seen. And so it's kind of funny because in Dragon Ball Super Superhero, you hear people talk about Gohan Beast, and they're like, oh, that came out of nowhere, and it's like not really. It was foreshadowed well in advance. It just took a while for the payoff because that was episode 90 of Super. So to get that payoff, you had to get through 41 episodes of Dragon Ball Super, two movies, right? 4 years of real time, or I think 5 years of real time because that episode maybe came out, sorry, 2017 maybe. If that's the case, I think we can go that route. So 41 episodes, two movies, 5 years of real time, um, and several power ups from everyone and new transformations later, we get a payoff for Gohan's statement in episode 90 in the form of Gohan Beast. that that's what I wanted to say. But yeah, so it's kind of wild. And I liked Dragon Ball Super overall. And after we got the pre-tournament stuff, we got into the tournament of power. And though not every episode landed, there was one with Tien that was particularly bad, which is unfortunate because Tien is an awesome character. And then there was one with Piccolo's ring out, and that sucked too because again, Piccolo is an awesome character. Um, but outside of those few off episodes, a lot of the tournament of power stuff hits, and there's the last stretch of episodes where it's just insane. There's 15 or so episodes where it just doesn't stop. And then of course, there's the 1 hour special, which, it amounts to two episodes, but it was run as a special when it came out. So it was episode 109 and 110. And it was that was the stuff with Goku versus Jiren for the first time. And it was crazy because, right, one, we hadn't seen Jiren fight and at that point, and so we were waiting to see that, and then you see Goku, and Goku is giving it his all, and it's just crazy to see. And again, going back to the stuff that I was saying earlier, um Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20 is a million times multiplier of the base, and at this point Goku's base is absurd, right? Because the bases are never fixed. If they were, Goku wouldn't jump up from 8,000 for his power level to 3 million in his base during the Frieza saga. I'm just saying, and there's countless other examples of people in their base forms getting powerful, but there is a weird misconception for some people where they think the bases are fixed, which doesn't make sense if they've actually read or watched the material. But anyway, so yeah, so there's what was I saying? Oh yeah. So at this point, we get that Goku is amped up in his base form, and then we get the crazy multipliers that come with Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20, and it's still not even enough to damage Jiren. It's enough to make him move, but it ain't enough to damage him. But later on, we see Goku and also Vegeta in his Blue Evolution form start to put Jiren in the ropes. Still not enough to defeat him, but they're doing better than Goku was doing at that moment, and that's an indicator of that growth in power. But anyway, that 1 hour special was amazing, and there were some good episodes after, and then it kind of fell off for a little bit again, and then it got good again. So I don't know, and that was kind of the thing with Super. Is there was a lot that worked, a lot that was good, and then there was a lot of times where it fell off, and then it would fall off for a while, but then it would get good again. And so it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But overall, I enjoyed the ride, and it was fun talking to people week to week about Dragon Ball. You know, it was feeling like a kid again, which is kind of ironic because it's it felt like that, but I've never not dealt with Dragon Ball. So it's you know what I mean? I grew up on it. Dragon Ball's been in my life for over 25 years at this point. So there's never not been Dragon Ball in my life, but it kind of felt how it felt growing up and watching it because I used to watch it Saturday mornings when it come on, and then it came to Tanami, And then so we were watching it 5 times a week, and no matter what, we were watching this stretched out material of Dragon Ball. And for me, I started with Z, and we watched it to the point because they didn't have everything dubbed at the time. But then Toonami came, and we eventually got new episodes. Then we kept on getting new episodes, and it happened for years. And then meanwhile, while Dragon Ball Z is running, Dragon Ball starts running on Toonami too. So we're watching that, and then eventually we get GT. Now it's kind of a train wreck, but that's my personal opinion. If you like GT, there's nothing wrong with that. But it was still Dragon Ball, right? And then you had like all throughout that, right? Like you had the movies, you had TV specials like History of Trunks and the Bardock special, and again like the movies because there was a lot of them, and also there was countless games and there kept on being games. And then we get like content every now and then, like you get Son Goku and his friends, which some people like, some people don't. And then you get like again games and something. I think it was like Raging Blast 2 was the one where it had the plan to eradicate like the Super Saiyans, which was like a modified version of the plan to eradicate the Saiyans, which is kind of obscure, but we would get that. And then there was the episode of Bardock, which it's like canonicity aside, it's a very weird feature. But we would get like Dragon Ball in spurts, but it never slowed down. And then Dragon Ball evolution happened, and that was a mess. But it didn't kill Dragon Ball, but it did amp up some things, and it kind of set Toriyama into motion for Battle of Gods to step in and saying, okay, no, 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 you're not just gonna put that out there. I'm gonna do my thing. Paraphrasing, of course. But and with Battle of Gods, I started off a new renaissance, right? A Dragon Ball renaissance, and it was good for a long time, right? Because after Battle of Gods and Resurrection F, we ended up getting, um, we ended up getting Super, which ran for around 3 years, and it wasn't long before we got Broly, and we had to wait a little bit for Superhero, but we got it, and now Super is done in a sense. Like I mean, there's been no um, official statements that says like done forever, but it ran for 131 episodes. It's had movies, and um, so maybe it returns, maybe it doesn't. But we are getting a new series soon. We're getting Dragon Ball Daima, and there's been a lot of discourse on that. And funny, like a lot of people that said they hated Super, or now I'm like, well, why can't we have Super back? Why do we get this? And it's like you can't please anyone, or you can't please everyone. Um, but so anyway, we have that, and Dragon Ball, like Dragon Ball Heroes is a thing that's been kind of in the background this whole time. Well, not this whole time, but like since 2018, like the anime, the promotional anime has been around since then, and with Dragon Ball Heroes in general, it's like I think that was around since the early 2010s. But anyway, we're still getting a lot of Dragon Ball materials, and I feel like Super left a mark. And though we haven't gotten a explicit Dragon Ball Super game, we've seen Dragon Ball Super characters show up in other Dragon Ball franchises, right? Like we've seen them in Dragon Ball like superheroes like Victory Mission. We've seen them in the Xenoverse games. Seen them in Dragon Ball Fighters, though mostly as DLC. Either way, we've seen these characters show up, and I am personally glad about that. And honestly, I don't think we adapt enough Dragon Ball material because, yeah, Dragon Ball Z is a huge chunk of Dragon Ball, like that whole Z section of the story. Um, you know, but it's not all there's to Dragon Ball. So it's like I would like a game that kind of covered everything, right? Lets you do all the Dragon Ball stuff, and then all the Dragon Ball Z stuff, and then all the Dragon Ball Super stuff. And if you're into GT, that too. And covering all the movies and specials and all that, like just a crazy beast of a game. Um, or just doing something crazy and wild and unique. Because I feel like a lot of the games that are supposed to do that are good. Like I like the Xenoverse games, for instance, but Xenoverse 2 is just a better version of Xenoverse 1. And Xenoverse 1 is just pretty much Dragon Ball Z with, more time travel. Just saying. These are not bad games, and I dig them. But I'm just saying, if we're gonna have something more unique, then let it be more unique. And to be fair, we get some games here and there. I just want to see that more, or see more comprehensive stuff. But just to be clear, I'm a big fan of the Z portion of the story. I grew up on Dragon Ball Z. Um, so yeah, where was I going with this? Dragon Ball Super. I liked it. It is not perfect, as far from it. I like it despite its flaws. And there's a lot of math in it. So yeah, that'll be the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Professor Prime out.